Your outboard is leaving power on the table right now. Not because it is old, not because it is worn out, but because of rules, software, and approved procedures that quietly choke it. The crazy part? The same dealerships that tell you everything is fine use a different playbook on their own motors. There are tricks they never print, resets they never mention, and setups that wake an engine up so fast it feels like a different engine. Some are in a legal gray zone, others are flat out not allowed on public water, and a few are so simple it is almost insulting no one told you. 20. Erasing your outboard's bad habits. Modern digital controlled outboards quietly build a profile of how they are used. If the first few hundred hours are slow pontoon cruises and gentle throttle, the engine control unit learns a soft lifestyle and keeps delivering soft response. Many dealerships have an internal reset procedure that wipes that learned behavior and forces the system to relearn as if the engine were brand new. Owners who get this done on a tired feeling Yamaha F 200 or Suzuki DF 140 often swear the boat feels lighter, the throttle sharper, without a single part being changed. Officially, this reset lives behind dealer software and training. Unofficially, it is the kind of thing a technician might run on their own boat before a big trip. It raises one simple question. If a quiet keystroke can wake an engine up this much, what else is being held back by software instead of metal? And once you start thinking about invisible limits, you begin to look very differently at the carbon building up where you cannot see it either. 19. The heavy-handed carbon purge. Ask any experienced outboard mechanic what slowly ruins older two-stroke cylinders and tired four-stroke valves, and you will hear the same word, carbon. Baked-on deposits raise compression, create hotspots, and turn friendly combustion into knock. The official fix is mild decarbonizing. The underground fix is stronger. Behind closed doors, some techs run high-concentration carbon cleaners through soot-loaded direct injection two-strokes or clogged four-strokes. The process is controlled, done far from marinas, and produces thick black plumes as years of carbon burn off. When it works, a shaky mid-range smooths out, and an engine that refused to idle suddenly feels younger. When it fails, fouled plugs, overheating, or weak pistons show why no brand wants to endorse it. Still, many pros insist a deep carbon purge can revive performance better than most bolt-on upgrades. And once you see that, you start questioning the rest of the approved maintenance schedule. 18. The real gear case service schedule. Owner's manuals calmly say to change lower unit oil once a season, or at fixed hour intervals. But talk to anyone rigging heavy center consoles or fast base boats, and you hear a different routine. They pull gear oil far more often, especially on Mercury Pro EXS and Suzuki DF, 300 setups that run big props under heavy load. Mechanics quietly admit they catch early metal flakes or a hint of water long before any official interval would have revealed it. There is nothing illegal about changing oil more often. The blurry part is when shops follow the factory schedule for customers, but quietly give their own boats a much more protective regime. If a few extra oil changes can prevent a $4,000 gear case failure, it makes you wonder what other lifetime systems were designed for convenience on paper, not real-world longevity. 17. Quiet surgery on exhaust relief. Two engines from the same year, and brand can sound completely different at idle. Often, the difference lives in the exhaust relief passages hidden in the midsection. From the factory, those ports and baffles are sized to control noise and meet certification tests. From the perspective of someone chasing performance, they are also a bottleneck. There is a long history of owners and tuners enlarging relief holes, swapping to less restricted midsections from competition models, or otherwise persuading the exhaust to escape more freely. Done with care, the result is sharper throttle, a few more revolutions per minute on the top end with light hulls, and a deeper, more aggressive tone that no brochure will ever promise. From a legal point of view, those passages are part of a certified emissions and noise system. Start drilling where no diagram shows a hole, and you leave the safe harbor of the original approval. Few people talk about that when they brag about how mean their Yamaha VMAX sounds at dawn. And once you realize how much character lives in those hidden passages, it is natural to wonder what else inside the engine bay is working harder than it has to. If this is already changing how you think about what your outboard can do, hit like so YouTube knows to push more real, no-fluff outboard breakdowns your way. And while you are here, drop a comment below which of these illegal tricks would you actually try, and which one feels way too risky. I read every one, and your answers decide which deep dive we uncover next. If you want the next set of buried boat shop secrets the moment they drop, make sure you subscribe. You will never look at a stock engine the same way again. 16. Playing with spark plug heat range. Most owners simply buy the spark plug code printed in the manual and never think about it again. Tuners tend to think in terms of temperature. On hard-worked two-stroke motors that live near wide open throttle, some quietly prefer a slightly colder plug to keep tips cooler. On four-stroke trolling engines that idle for hours, others favor a touch hotter to burn deposits. The change is small but noticeable. An engine that used to foul plugs after long no-wake zones may stay clean. A four-stroke that felt lazy coming off idle can pick up some crispness. The risk is just as real. Too hot in a hot climate and an IE plug can become a source of pre-ignition. Too cold and carbon builds instead of burns. From an emissions and warranty standpoint, manufacturers chose their specified heat range for reasons they can defend. Move away from that, and any later failure becomes easy to blame on incorrect components. Yet when mechanics admit they run different plugs in their own boats, it reveals a quiet truth. The printed recommendation is a tested compromise. Not always the last word for every way an engine can be used. And if such a small, hidden change can alter behavior, the bigger plastic chambers every engine breathes through start to look like an obvious next target. 15. Airbox surgery. Behind the cowling lift, the cowling on almost any modern outboard, and follow the intake path. Air is forced through chambers, resonators, and mufflers, shaped not just for performance, but for noise limits, emissions rules, and spray protection. To most owners, it is invisible engineering. To people chasing sharper throttle response, it looks like a maze built to slow an engine down. That is why you still hear stories about airboxes being quietly opened, resonators removed, or entire intake pieces swapped for freer breathing versions copied from competition models. Done carefully, the result is a motor that reacts instantly when the throttle cracks and breathes more easily at high load. None of this is printed in manuals. Many airboxes double as flame arresters, required to stop backfires from igniting fumes. Altering them can weaken that shield and move the engine outside its emission certification. Yet boats with mysteriously strong, identical engines often carry exactly these hidden tweaks. And once owners see how much response can be unlocked in plain sight, they start looking for other small changes that offer cheap insurance where breakdowns hurt the most. 14. Extra oil as cheap insurance. Anyone who has watched an oil pump failure destroy a two-stroke outboard never forgets it. Scored pistons, seized cranks. One failure can end a motor instantly. That fear quietly shaped a habit among certain owners. Add a touch of two-stroke oil directly to the fuel, even on injection-equipped engines, or return to premix entirely on high-risk setups. The logic is simple. A little extra oil in the charge provides a safety margin if the pump falters. On older engines, it can keep rings cooler and bearings happier. The downside is equally clear: more smoke, faster plug fouling, and behavior that modern emission systems hate. On paper, it pushes the engine outside its certified limits. But talk to longtime owners at a dock, and you hear the same confession. Their longest living engines always got a little insurance in the tank. Once you understand how past failures shaped that instinct, it becomes easier to see why some owners also begin adjusting systems that were supposed to stay untouched. 13. Neutral safety. That is not so safe anymore. Most boaters never think about neutral safety systems. You turn the key, nothing happens unless the control is centered. It prevents boats from jumping forward at startup and protects anyone near the transom. It is basic, invisible, and absolutely essential. But on stripped-down race rigs and questionable home conversions, that safeguard sometimes disappears. A bent switch, a bypassed wire, or a manual override lets the engine crank in gear. For someone trying to refire instantly after a spin-out, those seconds matter. For everyone else, it is a direct line to disaster. From a legal and safety standpoint, it is one of the clearest red lines in the entire outboard world. Once defeated, any sudden lurch is no longer an accident, it is evidence. Yet the fact that some boats still run with this modification shows how far people will go for responsiveness. And that same mindset leads straight into the next category: quiet tweaks to temperature control systems that seem small, but change how the engine behaves under real-world load. 12. Whispering to the thermostat. Modern four-stroke outboards live inside carefully chosen temperature windows. Thermostats and bypass passages hold cylinder heads in a range where fuel burns cleanly, oil behaves as designed, and emission strategies work as tested. Performance-minded owners, especially in warm water, often see heat as the main enemy. That is why you sometimes hear about slightly colder thermostats, tiny extra bleed holes, or other tweaks meant to keep engines a little cooler than stock. The theory is straightforward. Cooler metal gives more margin against detonation when running hard. The side effects worry engineers. An engine that never quite reaches its designed temperature can stay in warm-up enrichment longer, washing extra fuel onto cylinder walls. Carbon builds where it should have burned. Control units may read low temperature as a fault and change strategies in ways that undo any gain. Regulators also treat thermostats as part of the emission system. So changing them technically moves the motor outside its approved configuration. On closed-course boats that almost never idle gently, those risks look acceptable. On a family rig that trolls, cruises, and sits at anchor, they can quietly shorten the life everyone assumed was guaranteed. 11. Adding eyes to the fuel system. Modern outboards depend on high-pressure, very clean fuel. Tiny injector passages and sophisticated pumps are not fond of rust flakes, water, or mystery additives from tired marina tanks. Manufacturers respond by hiding filters inside modules and assemblies that most owners will never see. Some mechanics and careful owners quietly add another layer. They install a clear, high-quality, injection-rated filter in an accessible spot where it can be inspected regularly. At a glance, they can see if water is creeping through, if debris is building, and replace a cheap filter before anything expensive gets hurt. On paper, this is a modification to the fuel system that the factory never approved. Every extra joint and clamp is a potential leak. Marine standards exist specifically to control how fuel lines are run and secured. Surveyors and insurers pay close attention to anything that does not look original. Still, the appeal is obvious when you talk to someone who caught a tank of bad fuel early, because they could see the problem. It is difficult to argue with a $10 part that quietly prevented a ruined weekend offshore. And that same tension between official design and practical advantage appears again in how injectors themselves are treated. 10. The injector bath behind closed doors. The bottle of cleaner poured into a full tank is the public face of injector maintenance. The serious work happens off to the side. High-end shops own machines that pulse injectors with strong solvent, measure flow, and bring tired sets back into tight balance. Owners rarely see that part. They just feel a once rough engine now idles smoothly and pulls cleanly. Official literature tends to recommend replacement once injectors fall outside specification. Cleaning is treated as a minor step, not the main event, even though it clearly works when the right tools are used. In more improvised setups, you hear stories about engines briefly run on concentrated cleaning fluid through temporary rigs, far from marinas and without passengers. Deposits disappear quickly, so can any margin of lubrication for pumps and seals if someone misjudges the mix. No regulator wants marine engines doubling as test beds for aggressive solvents on public water. No manufacturer wants to argue about responsibility when a do-it-yourself flush ends with a failed pump. That is why the injector bath remains a backstage ritual, talked about quietly, even though its results are easy to feel. From there, it is a short step to the sensors that tell the engine how all of this worked. 9. Waking up the sensors. As outboards took on more car-like electronics, they gained oxygen sensors, manifold pressure sensors, intake air temperature probes, and more. All of them live in salt, moisture, and heat. Over years, their readings can drift. Instead of crisp corrections, the engine control unit gets muddy information and responds with rich mixtures, lazy timing changes, and warning lights that come and go. The official solution is simple: replace the suspect sensor with a new one and bill accordingly. Unofficially, plenty of technicians admit that some bad sensors spring back when treated gently with the correct cleaners and a careful hand. A sluggish oxygen sensor that was on the chopping block suddenly tracks again. A manifold pressure port clogged with oily film starts, reporting honestly after being cleared. Manufacturers rarely bless this kind of rescue work. From an emission standpoint, a sensor is either within specification or it is not. But the number of engines that suddenly feel better after inspecting and cleaning connections suggests there is more room for gray area than the parts catalog would like. 8. Steam cleaning the inside. Long before fuel injectors and laminated cowls, there were stories about using water itself to strip carbon from combustion chambers. The idea is simple. A fine mist of water enters the intake of a hot running engine, flashes into steam, and scours deposits off pistons and valves on its way out the exhaust. On simple carbureted outboards running on stands, versions of this method have been tried. When it goes well, mechanics claim to see dark clouds pour from the exhaust and to find cleaner-looking chambers the next time the head is off. Engines that once knocked under load sometimes come back quieter. The dark side is straightforward. Water does not compress, a little too much too quickly, and a cylinder can hydrolock. Bent connecting rods and broken pistons are not myths. No manufacturer wants to be within shouting distance of that risk. That is why today this steam cleansing exists mostly as a story older mechanics tell, half warning and half nostalgia. 7. Borrowing parts from cars. Modern outboards share a lot of deoxyribonucleic acid with automotive engines. Blocks, sensors, and even software strategies often start life in a car. That overlap has tempted some experimenters to take the next step and use actual automotive parts in marine roles. There are engines out there running ignition coils that were never stamped as marine, injectors lifted from passenger vehicles, or airflow sensors adapted from under-hood use on land. In controlled conditions, these parts can work well. They may even offer higher output or more convenient availability than marine-specific versions. The problem is that boat engine compartments are not dry, open engine bays. Marine-rated electrics are tested as ignition-protected in spaces where fuel vapor might be present. They are built with extra sealing and corrosion resistance. An automotive coil that works fine in the short term might crack, arc, or corrode in ways its designers never had to consider. If a fire or explosion ever traces back to that substitution, nobody involved will be interested in arguments about cost savings. Once you know how easily invisible substitutions can change risk, it becomes easier to see how even legitimate tuning tools like jack plates can be pushed past their intended role. 6. Jack plates beyond the comfortable limit. Adjustable jack plates change the way many boats run. Being able to lift an engine a little higher lets a hull carry more of itself out of the water, reducing drag and picking up speed. Within the ranges recommended by hull and engine builders, it is a powerful tuning tool. Beyond those ranges, things get interesting. Some high-performance rigs run their engines so high that the gear case barely sits in clean water. Propellers bite just enough to push, while water pickups skim the surface. The boat flies, but the margin between control and blowout shrinks dramatically. Capacity plates and manufacturer rigging charts quietly assume more conservative setups. When an engine is mounted higher and farther back than any of those documents contemplate, no one on the engineering side is promising what will happen if things go wrong. Every spectacular video of a boat walking on the edge of control carries the hint that the jack plate is doing more than it was ever sold to do. 5. 2 personalities in one exhaust. In the car world, switchable exhaust valves that go from quiet to wild at the push of a button are openly advertised. On some performance boats, a similar idea exists in much quieter fashion. Owners speak of dock mode and open mode without going into detail. Hidden in the rigging may be valves or diverters that send exhaust either through the fully muffled passageways that certification assumes, or through a more direct path with fewer restrictions. Around houses and patrol boats, the system behaves. Out on empty water, a different sound and slightly freer breathing emerge. Regulators take a simple view. Engines are certified as they are, not as they might be in one of several modes. If a motor can operate in a configuration that would have failed noise or emissions tests, even part of the time, it no longer truly matches its approval. Whether anyone ever checks depends mostly on who complains about that sudden roar in the distance. 4. Evaporative control that quietly vanishes. To meet modern standards, many fuel systems include carbon canisters, special vents, and hoses designed to capture fumes instead of letting them drift into the air. These systems work quietly, and most of the time, owners barely know they are there. When something goes wrong, though, symptoms can be maddening. Difficult refueling, constant tank pressure issues, Mysterious, rich, running complaints all trace back to valves and lines few people understand. In the most frustrated situations, pieces simply disappear. A canister is removed. A vent is rerouted straight to atmosphere. A purge line is capped. Immediately, some problems seem to vanish. Tanks breathe again. Smells and emissions return to what older boaters remember. On paper, this is a clear step outside compliance. Those parts existed because millions of small vapors add up. In practice, enforcement usually only arrives when someone has reason to perform a careful inspection, often after an unrelated incident. 3. Lifting the software ceiling. Every electronically controlled outboard has a maximum engine speed programmed into its brain. Hit that number, and fuel or spark are reduced, holding the motor below a line chosen for durability, noise, and emissions. On paper, that ceiling is non-negotiable. In certain racing and experimental circles, new engine control units, or modified software, lift that ceiling. On very light hulls, with carefully chosen propellers, that extra few hundred or more revolutions per minute can translate directly into higher top speed. The hardware often has the strength, at least for a while. The costs sit in the background. Bearing loads increase sharply with engine speed. Oil film margins shrink. Small imbalances in rotating parts turn into large forces. Regulators also treat tampering with limiters as another form of emissions control defeat. When things go wrong, nobody on the official side claims they were surprised. 2. The nitrous whisper. Nitrous, oxide, and outboards sound like an unlikely pair, and perhaps they should. Still, in certain stories about short drag races on quiet stretches of water, you hear about small fogger nozzles and carefully measured shots, adding brief bursts of power to older two-stroke V engines. On paper, the idea is the same as in automotive use. Extra oxygen in the charge allows more fuel to burn in a short window, producing a noticeable step up in thrust. In practice, marine engines and gear cases were never designed with that in mind. One miscalculation on jet size or timing and expensive parts scatter. Nobody sells a recreational nitrous kit for modern outboards with a legal department behind it. That should say enough. Whether a few homemade systems ever actually ran successfully, or whether most of these tales are more legend than fact, is part of what keeps the story alive. 1. Race fuel and a different brain. At the far edge of outboard tuning are engines that look ordinary from the dock, but live in a different world under the cowl. In certain racing classes, familiar blocks run on high-octane race fuel or alcohol-based blends, and are controlled by custom engine control units that owe little to their factory maps. With that fuel, tuners can advance ignition timing far beyond what regular petrol allows, raise compression, and in some cases push boost to levels no recreational calibration would tolerate. The power jump is not subtle. A package that once felt strong on a fishing hull can become genuinely violent on a light tunnel boat. None of this belongs in everyday use. The fuel is expensive and rare at normal marinas. Emissions fall completely outside recreational rules. A single mistake in mapping or fueling can turn an impressive engine into scrap in seconds. But once you know that this much extra performance exists inside the same basic castings, it is hard not to look at a stock engine and wonder how much of its personality comes from metal and how much comes from the software and fuel it was born with. You have now seen just how far people will go to squeeze hidden power out of an outboard. Sometimes smart, sometimes risky, sometimes crossing lines nobody talks about. And the wild part? These 20 tricks are only the ones people admit to. There are deeper methods, quieter loopholes, and tweaks so effective they almost never leave the back room of a shop. It makes you wonder, if this much potential is buried inside a normal engine, what else is still hiding under that cowling? Before you leave, tell me this in the ED comments. Which trick surprised you the most, and which one would you actually try? If you want more unfiltered outboard truth, hit like so YouTube knows you want it, and subscribe so you do not miss the next set of secrets manufacturers definitely do not want on camera.